January 30th, 1968. Tan Son Nhut Air Base, Saigon, 2100 hours. Staff Sergeant Michael Torres crouched in the perimeter bunker, M16 across his knees, listening to the distant crump of artillery fire. Another search and destroy operation lit up the horizon 15 clicks northwest. The 25th Infantry Division working some grid squares in the Iron Triangle. Third one this week. The night sky pulsed orange, then faded to black. "How many you figure we got today?" asked Private Daniels, his face illuminated by the ember of his cigarette. Torres didn't answer. He'd stopped counting months ago. The scoreboard at MACV headquarters claimed 220,000 enemy KIA since 1965. 3 years of hunting Charlie through triple canopy jungle, 3 years of body counts climbing toward some theoretical breaking point. General Westmoreland kept saying they were winning, that one more operation would turn the tide. But Torres had seen the pattern. Every firebase they built, Charlie mortared. Every village they cleared, Charlie returned. They'd sweep through an area, stack bodies, declare victory, and move to the next grid square. 2 weeks later, intelligence reported enemy activity in the same location. What Torres didn't know, what none of them knew, was that 13 kilometers away, in a safe house in Cholon, Senior Colonel Tran Van Tra was giving final orders to 84,000 Viet Cong and North Vietnamese army troops. Tomorrow, they would prove what Torres had begun to suspect, that you could win every battle and still lose the war. The radio crackled. "All units, be advised. Tet ceasefire begins at 600 tomorrow." Torres laughed bitterly. 3 years of search and destroy operations, and they were taking a holiday. When General William Westmoreland assumed command of Military Assistance Command, Vietnam, MACV, in June 1964, he arrived with a doctrine forged in 2 world wars in Korea. Find the enemy, fix him in place, and destroy him with overwhelming firepower. It was elegant, mathematical, and, to a generation of officers schooled in conventional warfare, utterly logical. The solution in Vietnam is more bombs, more shells, more napalm, Westmoreland told reporters in early 1965, till the other side cracks and gives up. The strategy had a seductive clarity. North Vietnam and the Viet Cong had finite manpower. America had infinite firepower. Simple attrition mathematics suggested that if U.S. forces could kill enemy soldiers faster than they could be replaced, the communists would eventually reach a crossover point and collapse. Pentagon planners loved the concept because it was quantifiable. Defense Secretary Robert McNamara, the former Ford Motor Company executive who'd revolutionized automobile production through statistical analysis, saw warfare through the same lens. "Every quantitative measurement we have shows we're winning this war," he announced in 1966, citing body count ratios of 10:1 or even 15.1 in America's favor. The doctrine had worked before. In World War II, the Allies crushed Germany and Japan through industrial-scale destruction: Dresden, Hamburg, Tokyo, Hiroshima. In Korea, massive firepower along the 38th parallel eventually forced a stalemate favorable to the West. Why wouldn't it work in Vietnam? Early search and destroy operations seemed to validate the approach. Operation Starlight in August 1965, the first major U.S. ground offensive, killed an estimated 614 Viet Cong while suffering only 45 American casualties. Marine Corps commanders declared it a resounding success. Operation Silver Bayonet in the Ia Drang Valley 2 months later produced similar results. Approximately 1,800 NVA killed versus 305 American deaths. "We're going to out-guerrilla the guerrilla and out-ambush the ambush," Westmoreland declared, "because we've got more mobility and more firepower and more endurance." He envisioned helicopter-borne infantry sweeping through communist base areas, supported by artillery, tactical airstrikes, and B-52 arc light bombing missions. The enemy would be forced to fight or flee. Either way, they'd be destroyed. Young lieutenants fresh from Fort Benning arrived believing in the mission. "We thought it was like a math problem," recalled Lieutenant James Webb, later a senator and Secretary of the Navy. "You clear Area A, move to Area B, connect them, expand outward. Eventually, you run out of map." Even skeptical field officers initially accepted the premise. Colonel David Hackworth, one of the Army's most decorated veterans, later admitted, "In 65 and 66, I thought search and destroy made sense. The NVA was sending divisions south. We had to hit them before they reached the population centers. What I didn't understand yet was that we were fighting the wrong war." The confidence was palpable, infectious, and, as subsequent events would prove, catastrophically misplaced. The intellectual architecture of search and destroy began not in the jungles of Southeast Asia, but in the seminar rooms of the Pentagon and the National Security Council chambers. When President Kennedy escalated U.S. military advisors from 900 to 16,000 between 1961 and 1963, he envisioned a limited counterinsurgency campaign, training South Vietnamese forces while winning hearts and minds through civic action programs. President Lyndon Johnson inherited a different reality. By mid-1964, the South Vietnamese Army, ARVN, was losing. Viet Cong attacks increased from 1,000 per month in 1963 to over 2,000 by early 1965. North Vietnamese Army regulars began infiltrating down the Ho Chi Minh Trail in division-strength formations. Johnson faced a choice: escalate or abandon South Vietnam to communist control. He chose escalation, and with it, General Westmoreland's strategy of attrition warfare, packaged under the operational concept of search and destroy. The mechanics were deceptively straightforward. Intelligence, gathered from signals intercepts, aerial reconnaissance, captured documents, and South Vietnamese informants, would identify enemy base areas. American units would helicopter into landing zones, LZs, nearby, establish blocking positions, then sweep through the target area. Enemy forces encountered would be fixed by infantry, while artillery and airstrikes delivered devastating firepower. After the operation, troops would extract, and the body count would be tallied. Helicopter mobility was revolutionary. The 1st Cavalry Division, Airmobile, arriving in Vietnam in September 1965, could deploy an entire battalion, 400 men, anywhere within a 50-mile radius in under an hour. Captain John Herr, a UH-1D pilot, described the psychological impact. "We'd come in low over the tree line, door gunners blazing, and insert a rifle company right in Charlie's backyard. It felt like we were writing a new chapter in warfare." Early operations established the template. Operation Piranha in September 1965 inserted 5,000 Marines onto the Batangan Peninsula, sweeping south against an estimated 2,500 Viet Cong. The Communists withdrew, suffering light casualties. American commanders declared success based on territory cleared. By 1966, search and destroy became the dominant operational mode. The 1st Infantry Division, 25th Infantry Division, 173rd Airborne Brigade, and 101st Airborne Division conducted dozens of named operations: Attleboro, El Paso, Dallas, Birmingham, Masher, White Wing. Each followed the same pattern: intelligence, insertion, sweep, extraction, body count. The logistical infrastructure supporting these operations was staggering. Westmoreland demanded and received everything he requested. By late 1966, U.S. forces consumed 850,000 tons of supplies monthly. Artillery batteries fired an average of 10,000 rounds daily. Helicopter losses exceeded 1,000 aircraft annually, yet replacements arrived within weeks. America was applying industrial-scale resources to defeat peasant insurgents. but warning signs emerged early. After Operation Attleboro, the largest operation to date, involving 22,000 American troops, killed an estimated 100 enemy in November 1966. Intelligence reported NVA and Viet Cong strength in the region unchanged within 30 days. The enemy was replacing losses as fast as Americans could inflict them. Colonel John Paul Van, a legendary advisor to South Vietnamese forces, began questioning the entire premise. "We're fighting a political war, and we've been sucked into a military confrontation," he told colleagues in early 1967. "Worse, we're fighting it on their terms." His warnings went unheeded. MACV headquarters focused on the metrics: enemy casualties, weapons captured, territory cleared. The numbers looked good. The war looked winnable. On paper. Operation Cedar Falls, January 8-26, 1967. The Iron Triangle. The Iron Triangle, a 60-square-mile stretch of dense jungle 25 miles north of Saigon, had sheltered Viet Cong forces for over 20 years. Honeycombed with tunnels, fortified bunkers, and underground hospitals, it was the communist headquarters for military operations around the capital. Westmoreland decided to eliminate it permanently. He assembled the largest American ground force yet committed: 30,000 troops from the 1st and 25th Infantry Divisions, 173rd Airborne Brigade, and 11th Armored Cavalry Regiment. Supporting them were 60 B-52 bombers, hundreds of tactical aircraft, and massive artillery concentrations. The plan called for sealing the triangle's perimeter, then systematically destroying everything inside. Lieutenant Michael Lee, leading a platoon from Company C, 2nd Battalion, 28th Infantry, described the opening minutes. "We came in fast, 30 Hueys in formation. The door gunner was yelling over the engine noise, 'Hot LZ! Hot LZ!' I could see green tracers coming up from the tree line. The second our skids touched, we were off and running for cover. 2 guys got hit before we reached the jungle edge. For 18 days, American forces bulldozed villages, destroyed tunnel complexes, and engaged scattered enemy forces. Engineers used Rome plows, giant bulldozers, to literally erase the jungle, creating a barren wasteland. They evacuated 6,000 civilians, relocating them to refugee camps. They discovered the Cu Chi Tunnel Network's northern entrance, a multi-level underground city complete with hospitals, workshops, and sleeping quarters. The statistics seemed overwhelming. Official reports claimed 750 Viet Cong killed, 280 captured, 512 suspects detained, 5,987 bunkers destroyed, 23 tons of rice confiscated, and 3,700 pages of documents seized. American losses: 72 killed, 37 wounded. But Captain William Broyles, a Marine officer observing the operation, noted something troubling. "We never found their main forces. We'd sweep through an area, find fortifications, find supplies, find tunnel entrances. But where were the troops? They'd vanished. It was like fighting smoke." The answer came in intelligence debriefs. The Viet Cong 9th Division, warned by informants days before the operation launched, had simply relocated west into Cambodia, 15 miles beyond American reach. They'd sacrificed local guerrillas and infrastructure to preserve their regular forces. 6 weeks after Cedar Falls ended, aerial reconnaissance detected enemy activity resuming in the Iron Triangle. Operation Junction City, February 22nd, May 14th, 1967. War Zone C. Westmoreland tried again, even bigger. Junction City threw 35,000 troops into War Zone C, near the Cambodian border, targeting the central office for South Vietnam, Cus Vien, the Communist Command Headquarters for the entire Southern Theater. The operation opened with the only major combat parachute jump of the Vietnam War. 780 paratroopers from the 173rd Airborne Brigade dropped onto Drop Zone Charlie, securing a blocking position while ground forces advanced from other directions. Specialist 4 Jim Solar, a medic with the 173rd, remembered the jump. Beautiful morning, perfect visibility. We went out at 900 feet, low enough to minimize exposure but high enough to deploy. I could see the whole battlefield laid out below. Then we started taking fire on the way down. RPG rounds leaving smoke trails. Some guys got shot before they hit the ground. For 82 days, American forces conducted the most intensive search and destroy campaign of the war. They engaged in multiple pitched battles. Soi Tre on March 21st saw a single battalion repel 2 NVA regiments in a 6-hour firefight. American artillery fired 30,000 rounds that day alone. The battle statistics were impressive. An estimated 647 enemy killed versus 31 Americans. Body counts climbed steadily. By operation's end, MACV claimed 2,728 enemy killed, 34 captured, 65 suspects detained, and 139 individual weapons recovered. American losses: 282 killed, 1,576 wounded. But they never found COSVN. Intelligence later determined the headquarters had relocated into Cambodia weeks before Junction City launched, again warned by communist intelligence networks that penetrated South Vietnamese and American planning staffs. Sergeant First Class Ola Mies, a veteran of both World War II and Korea, expressed the growing frustration. We'd go into an area, kill everything that moved, blow up everything standing. 2 weeks later, Charlie's back. We weren't taking territory. We weren't holding ground. We were just making noise and stacking bodies. The realization began spreading through the ranks. Search and destroy operations could win tactical victories indefinitely without achieving strategic success. You couldn't attrite an enemy willing to accept casualties indefinitely, supplied by external powers, fighting on terrain they knew intimately, supported by populations who viewed Americans as occupiers rather than liberators. Major General Julian Ewell, commanding the 9th Infantry Division, later admitted, "By mid-67, a lot of us understood we were in a war we couldn't win through firepower alone. But nobody wanted to say it out loud. The machine was too big, too committed, too invested in the body count." The North Vietnamese and Viet Cong studied American tactics with meticulous attention, developing counters that exploited search and destroy's inherent weaknesses. Communist forces implemented what they called grab them by the belt tactics, closing to point-blank range where American artillery and air support couldn't be used without hitting friendly forces. At the Battle of Ong Thon in October 1967, NVA troops ambushed the 2nd Battalion, 28th Infantry at ranges of 10 to 15 meters, negating American firepower advantages. The battalion lost 64 killed in 4 hours. They perfected the art of breaking contact. "We don't have to win," explained Nguyen Hu An, an NVA colonel who fought in the Ia Drang Valley. "We just have to survive. Every American operation has a time limit: 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month. We disappear into the jungle, into Cambodia, into the tunnels. When they leave, we come back." The tunnel networks became legendary. At Cu Chi, American tunnel rats, soldiers small enough to crawl through the passages, discovered a 75-mile network containing conference rooms, hospitals, weapon factories, and living quarters for hundreds of fighters. Captain Herbert Thornton, who led tunnel rat operations, described the psychological impact. You'd sweep an area, think you'd cleared it, and Charlie would pop up behind you from a hidden trapdoor. They were living right underneath our base camps. Communist intelligence networks consistently warned of upcoming operations. Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Harrington, an intelligence officer, later wrote, "The VC had better intelligence about our operations than we had about theirs. They knew our TON, table of organization and equipment, our standard operating procedures, our radio frequencies. We were fighting a transparent war against an invisible enemy. American forces adapted too, though often ineffectively. They established permanent fire bases, artillery positions on hilltops to provide constant fire support. But fire bases became targets themselves. Firebase Mary Ann was overrun in March 1971. Firebase Ripcord was abandoned under siege in July 1970. They created free fire zones, where anything moving could be engaged without authorization. The policy killed countless civilians, turning potential allies into enemies. Lieutenant Philip Caputo, author of A Rumor of War, described the moral erosion. We went in wanting to help these people. Within months, we couldn't distinguish friend from enemy, so we started assuming everyone was enemy. Technology was supposed to compensate for tactical frustrations. The Pentagon spent $1.7 billion on the McNamara line, an electronic barrier of sensors, mines, and observation posts along the DMZ designed to detect infiltration. The NVA simply bypassed it through Laos and Cambodia. The military introduced harassment and interdiction fires, random artillery bombardments of suspected enemy locations. It consumed massive ammunition with negligible effect. An Army study later determined that harassment fires killed an estimated 1 enemy soldier per 20,000 rounds fired. Chemical defoliation through Agent Orange aimed to deny the enemy jungle cover. Operation Ranch Hand sprayed 20 million gallons of herbicides, defoliating 4.5 million acres. But defoliation patterns revealed the location of American bases, and the ecological damage created resentment among Vietnamese farmers whose crops and livestock were destroyed. Captain Brian Winhover, an infantry company commander in 1968, summarized the paradox. We had every advantage: air superiority, artillery, helicopters, night vision, communications. But none of it mattered because we were fighting the wrong kind of war. They didn't need to defeat us militarily. They just needed to outlast us politically. By late 1967, that truth was becoming undeniable. American casualties climbed, 9,378 killed in 1967, up from 6,143 in 1966. Enemy casualties climbed proportionally, estimated 90,000 killed in 1967. But NVA and Viet Cong forces in South Vietnam actually increased from 280,000 in 1966 to $300,000 by January 1968. The crossover point, the mythical moment when enemy losses would exceed replacement capability, never arrived. North Vietnam was drafting 100,000 men annually. The Ho Chi Minh Trail delivered 5,000 fresh troops monthly, along with weapons and ammunition from China and the Soviet Union. American firepower was killing tens of thousands, but the insurgency was growing stronger. On January 30, 1968, American commanders had reason for optimism. The monthly body count for 1967 exceeded 100,000 enemy killed. Westmoreland told Congress that victory was within reach, that American forces had seized the initiative. We have reached an important point when the end begins to come into view, he declared in November 1967. The statistics supported his confidence. In 1967 alone, U.S. forces conducted 1,400 battalion-size operations, fired 160 million small arms rounds, dropped 1.4 million tons of bombs, and expended 2.7 million artillery rounds. No insurgency in history had absorbed such punishment. But MACV headquarters fundamentally misunderstood the nature of the war. While American forces focused on search and destroy operations in remote jungle base areas, North Vietnam and the Viet Cong prepared a coordinated offensive that would strike simultaneously at every major city, provincial capital, and military installation in South Vietnam. General Vo Nguyen Giap, architect of North Vietnam's strategy, later explained the logic. The Americans wanted battles. We gave them battles in places we chose, at times we chose, for durations we chose. We accepted casualties to draw American forces away from population centers. Then we struck where they were weakest, the cities. On January 31, 1968, during the Tet holiday ceasefire, 84,000 communist troops attacked 36 provincial capitals, 5 major cities, dozens of district towns, and numerous military bases. In Saigon, a Viet Cong sapper squad blasted through the wall of the U.S. Embassy compound. In Hue, NVA forces occupied the Imperial Citadel and held it for 26 days. The offensive was a tactical disaster for the Communists. They suffered an estimated 45,000 killed, nearly 50% of attacking forces. The expected popular uprising never materialized. South Vietnamese forces, contrary to American expectations, fought effectively. Within days, American firepower, exactly what search and destroy was designed to deliver, crushed the attacks. By every military metric, Tet was an overwhelming American victory. Specialist 4 John Hoskins, defending Long Bin Base during the initial assault, described the firepower response. They came at us in waves. We had pre-plotted artillery fires, gunships circling overhead, F-4s dropping napalm 500 meters out. We killed them by the hundreds, but Jesus Christ, they kept coming. After 3 years of search and destroy, after all those body counts, where the hell were they all coming from? That question shattered American confidence. Television cameras captured the fighting in Saigon's streets. Viet Cong sappers inside the embassy, summary executions, refugees fleeing, contradicting 3 years of official pronouncements about winning the war. Walter Cronkite, America's most trusted news anchor, returned from Vietnam and declared, "It seems now more certain than ever that the bloody experience of Vietnam is to end in a stalemate." The political impact exceeded the military outcome. President Johnson's approval rating plummeted. Anti-war protests intensified. On March 31, 1968, Johnson announced he would not seek re-election and proposed peace negotiations. General Earl Wheeler, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, captured the strategic catastrophe in a classified memo. The enemy has dealt the GVN, Government of South Vietnam, a severe blow. He has brought the war to the towns and cities and has inflicted damage and casualties on the population. Homes have been destroyed. Distribution of the necessities of life has been interrupted. Thousands of persons have been displaced. ARVN was not prepared for this type of attack and was surprised. U.S. forces, although surprised by the breadth of the offensive, responded well. The admission was devastating. After 3 years of search and destroy operations, supposedly pushing the enemy to the brink of collapse, Communist forces had executed the largest coordinated offensive of the war, and American intelligence had completely missed it. Westmoreland requested 206,000 additional troops to finish the job. The request was denied. The Pentagon leaked it to the press, creating a political firestorm. If the U.S. was winning, why did it need more troops? Westmoreland was replaced by General Creighton Abrams in June 1968. The new commander gradually shifted from search and destroy to clear and hold operations, emphasizing pacification, Vietnamization, and smaller unit tactics. But the strategic damage was irreversible. Tet proved that no amount of American firepower could compensate for an enemy with unlimited patience, external sanctuaries, and popular support. Search and destroy operations killed hundreds of thousands of enemy soldiers while accomplishing nothing strategically. The doctrine's fundamental error was assuming that firepower could substitute for political legitimacy, that body counts equaled progress, that attrition warfare could defeat revolutionary insurgency. Colonel Harry Summers, in his post-war analysis on strategy, identified the core fallacy. We confused tactical success with strategic victory. We won virtually every battle, yet lost the war. That's not a paradox. That's a strategy failure of historic proportions. The lessons influenced subsequent conflicts, though imperfectly. In Iraq and Afghanistan, U.S. commanders initially employed search and destroy variants, sweep operations, cordon and search, targeted raids, before recognizing that counterinsurgency requires protecting populations, not killing insurgents. General David Petraeus's 2007 surge strategy in Iraq explicitly rejected Vietnam-era body count metrics in favor of population security measures. Veterans on both sides carried scars. "We were brave, we were skilled, we were committed," reflected Ron Kovich, paralyzed in combat in 1968 and later author of Born on the 4th of July. But we were fighting the wrong war, the wrong way, for the wrong reasons. Nguyen Thanh Xuan, a former Viet Cong fighter, offered a different perspective. American soldiers were courageous. Their firepower was terrifying. But they never understood that we weren't fighting for territory or body counts. We were fighting for our country's future. We would accept any sacrifice for that. On January 30th, 1968, as Staff Sergeant Torres sat in his bunker at Tan Son Nhut, neither side understood that the next day would change everything. The Tet Offensive would reveal what 3 years of search and destroy operations had obscured. That America's overwhelming firepower couldn't win a war where the enemy defined victory not as territory held, but as will sustained. The fundamental truth of search and destroy was this: you can destroy everything you can find, but you can't find an enemy who refuses to be found, who melts into the population, who crosses borders at will, who measures success in decades rather than quarterly body count reports. America invented a new way to fight. But in Vietnam, innovation without understanding proved worse than useless. It was catastrophic,